Hello and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here, and today we're doing something a little bit different and we're going to be talking all about shaker cards, and I'm going to cover different things that I have learned about making shakers, and maybe you will find that useful if you're new to making shaker cards, or even if you've already made a few before, you might learn something new from this. So I'm going to jump right into it and I'm going to talk about making the shape of your shaker. So you can make shakers that cover your whole card front as like a frame, so the shaker is the full size of the card. Or alternatively, you can make a shaker that is kind of inlaid into a panel that sits on top of your card. And then another option is to make a separate shaker element and add it onto the top of your card. So it can be a full front shaker, an inset shaker, or a shaker sitting on top of the card that you are creating. As for creating your windows, there are a number of different ways of how you can do this. The most simple is to just create a rectangle frame using a paper trimmer, just by cutting a certain distance in on the edge of your panel. You could even use a ruler and craft knife to do this if you like. This ruler I have is the cutter line, and it actually has a slit in the middle of the ruler that you can cut down, which works nicely. But of course you could also just use a regular ruler for this. Alternatively, you could use a die. You can get frame dies that work very nicely for making shakers. This particular one has 3 windows, and you could do that so that each window is a separate shaker, or you could do it that it's one shaker going behind all 3 of them. If you don't have a frame die, you could create your own frame using 2 shape dies that nest together, so a smaller one and a larger one, and you just would use some washi tape or similar to hold the 2 frames together in place when you run them through your die cutting machine. Then of course you can just create your window with a shape die, and you can use any shape for this, but ideally one that has some open spaces so that you'll be able to see your shaker elements through it. So you can use a basic shape like just an oval, or something a bit more intricate like this swan wreath die that I have on screen. And that works well for the kind of inset design where you're cutting it into a panel, and in a way the rest of the panel creates the frame for the design. There are also dies available on the market which are specifically designed for shakers. So as you can see, this one cuts the balloon itself and also a frame, which you can use to build up a shaker element to go on your card. And then there's also the option of using a word die to create a fun shaker window, and this can give you a very different look from the other options. And you could use a word die that has large letters, or you could use something a bit scriptier like this, and if it comes with a shadow, which a lot of dies do come with the word itself and a shadow, then the shadow portion could be used to create the window opening, and I will show a card that I made in that way a bit later on in this video. Next we're going to talk about the options for your window material. The most common window material to use with a shaker is acetate, which is a kind of clear plastic. You can buy heat embossable acetate, or you could use leftover plastic packaging from stamps, for example, which will also work. Another option is to use vellum. Vellum is still relatively sturdy, you can heat emboss it if you like, and it's just less see-through, more opaque. Next I'm showing some parchment paper, which is very similar to vellum, but it's slightly heavier feeling and a bit more plasticky. Another option would be tissue paper, but you want to make sure that it's not too flimsy because then it might break too easily. But if you want the look of tissue paper with a bit more strength, you could always layer up tissue paper over a piece of acetate, and that will give it a bit more sturdiness. And then another option that can be very interesting is to use tulle. Tulle is a fabric and it has little holes in it, I guess. It's kind of like a netting. You can see your shaker material through it, but with tulle you want to make sure you're not using any fine filling that would be able to come through those holes. talking of filling, the most common filling to use in shakers are sequins. You can buy sequin mixes that come in a variety of colours and shapes that can add interest to your shaker card, and you can even build your own shaker mixes by combining different sequins that you have on hand. Glitter is another fun option for using in your shaker cards. This is obviously much finer and definitely won't work with that tool if that's what you're choosing as a window. As well as these, although I don't have any to show you, but another option is to use seed beads, which give a nice sound to the shaker. And of course you can use any sort of small object that will fit in your window that will give that shaking noise. You could use sand, you could use coffee beans, you can use seeds of various varieties, you could use little seashells. People have even made shakers that are water shakers, which can be fun. So there are a lot of different possibilities out there. Another thing to consider when building a shaker card is the kind of adhesive you want to use to build your dimension. Most often people will use foam tape. I have a big roll of foam tape here, and usually you will want to double up the foam tape to make sure it's thick enough to allow your filling to shake properly. Although of course that depends what your filling is. Something like glitter doesn't need as much space as sequins or seed beads might. You can also get foam strips and foam squares, which work as another option instead of the foam tape, but you want to make sure that you keep them nice and close together when building the walls of your shaker so that nothing can get out between them. Some companies sell adhesive foam sheets that you can use, or alternatively you can get craft foam and add your own adhesive to that. Craft foam and foam sheets work really well for those finer particles elements of your shaker because there are no gaps for those elements to leak through if you've adhered them down properly. You could also build dimension by adhering together several layers of cardstock. You would need quite a lot of layers to get as much depth as you would with the foam tape, but it is another option there. And also you can make shakers that don't have any dimension at all just by adhering your top panel flat to the card base. I'll link to an example of that in the top right hand corner. When you're doing that, you obviously won't get as much movement with your shaker, so it's probably best to do with something that has a finer detail. And also make sure that your filling is quite spread out in the window area before adhering the pieces together so that it has a bit more freedom to move. So those are all the elements to consider when you are going to build a shaker card, and now I'm going to show you a few examples. Here is a very basic shaker. I made a frame which I cut with my paper trimmer. It has an acetate window. I did, in this case, heat emboss a sentiment and I created a simple background for it, but you can even leave it without anything if you really just want the shaker to be the star of the show here. And then I filled it with sequins as my filling. And I will be sharing another video showing how I built this shaker. If you'd like to see how to put together a simple shaker, do come back and check for that video soon. And when it is uploaded, I'll link to that in the top right hand corner here. My next example uses tulle as the shaker window. And here I've done an inset design with that swan wreath die that I showed earlier. I only used one layer of foam tape here, so the sequins don't move quite as much as they would with a double layer, but I thought it worked well for that tulle design. My third example is a shaker that uses a word die to create the window opening, and I used the parchment paper for my window material, which is quite opaque, so you can't really see the shaker material behind it. In this case, I used white glitter as the shaker material. I think in hindsight I should have used a more colourful glitter because that would show through that parchment paper a bit better. And as I'd used the glitter, I did use craft foam to build my dimension so that that glitter wouldn't be able to leak out. So those are the 3 examples I'm sharing today of the shaker cards. I hope you found this video informative and maybe it taught you something new about how to make a shaker card. Don't forget you can check back later to see my other video that shows putting one together. If you enjoyed this video, please do press the like button to let me know. And you could let me know in the comments if you've ever made a shaker card before. If you have, perhaps you have some other tips that you'd like to share with us on how to get the most out of your shakers. If you have an idea for another video like this that you'd like me to talk about a particular element of card making, then please do let me know that in the comments as well. If you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, you can subscribe by pressing the button that's on screen now, and there are also a couple of other videos showing if you'd like to see more from me straight away. Otherwise, I'll thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!